The galaxy stretched across billions of stars, but for 3,000 years, it had been deadly quiet. Every race that had learned to travel between worlds knew the most important rule of survival: never make noise, never send radio signals, never let anyone know where you are. The silence was not peace, it was fear. The Kethfer people learned this rule the hard way. They used to be proud explorers, sending messages across space to share their discoveries. Then the Devourers came. These were not ordinary aliens. They were hunters that moved through space like sharks through water, following any signal back to its source. The Kethfer watched in horror as world after world in the Andorian sector went dark. Billions of their people died because they had dared to speak. The Zephyrian Collective made the same mistake. When their mining colonies ran into trouble, they sent out distress calls asking for help. The help never came, but something else did. The Devourers followed those signals, like bloodhounds following a scent trail. Entire star systems simply vanished from all contact. The survivors knew what had happened, but they were too afraid to even whisper about it. Every spacefaring race in the galaxy had similar stories. The archivists, who had kept records for 1,000,000 years, stopped sharing their knowledge. The proud warriors of the hegemony put away their war drums and battle songs. Even pirates and criminals learned to work in absolute silence. The rule was simple: make noise and die. This is why Earth was so terrifying to watch. Commander Thale stood in the observation deck of Deep Space Monitoring Station 7, staring at the data streams flowing across his screens. His forearms moved quickly over the controls, adjusting sensors to get a better look at the impossible sight before him. The third planet of a small yellow star was broadcasting constantly. Not just a little bit, they were practically screaming. "Into space, Commander," his communications officer called out, her scaled face tight with worry. "The human signals are getting stronger again. They just launched something called high-definition television across their entire planet. The energy signature is enormous." Thale felt his secondary heart skip a beat. He had been watching Earth for 20 years now, ever since their signals first reached Kethfer space. At first he thought they were just a young species that would learn the rules quickly. Maybe they would detect the Devourers coming and go quiet. Maybe they would realize the danger and stop broadcasting instead. They got louder every year. The humans sent radio waves in all directions. They bounced signals off their moon. They launched metal objects into space that screamed their location. To anyone listening, they even put information about their planet's exact location on physical probes and shot them toward other stars. It was like watching someone paint a giant target on their house and then set it on fire to make sure everyone could see it. "Sir, should we report this to the Galactic Council?" asked his junior officer, a young Kethfer who still remembered the stories of the old days before the silence. Thale considered this carefully. The Galactic Council had been debating what to do about Earth for decades. Some members wanted to send a secret message warning the humans about the danger. Others wanted to destroy Earth themselves before the Devourers found it. A few even suggested trying to make contact and bring the humans into galactic society. But the silence protocols were absolute. No contact with broadcasting species. It was the one law that every race agreed on, written in the blood of countless dead worlds. Any species stupid enough to announce its presence to the galaxy deserved whatever happened to it. That was the cold logic that had kept the remaining civilizations alive for 3,000 years. "No," Thale said finally. "We watch. We record. We do nothing else." The communications officer pulled up another screen showing the content of human broadcasts. Thale had learned their languages over the years, fascinated despite himself by what these doomed people were saying. They told stories about exploring space and meeting alien life. They sang songs about reaching for the stars. They even made entertainment about fighting off alien invasions and winning. The irony was painful. Here was a species dreaming of joining a galactic community that was too afraid to let them know it existed. They imagined themselves as brave space explorers, while the real space explorers hid in the dark, terrified of making the smallest sound. "How long do you think they have?" the junior officer asked quietly. Thale did the calculations in his head. Human radio signals had been traveling outward for over a century now. They had probably reached several devourer hunting zones already. The fact that Earth still existed was either incredible luck or something else entirely. The devourers should have found them by now, he admitted. I don't understand why they haven't. Outside the station's windows, space looked peaceful and empty, but Thale knew better. Somewhere out there in the darkness, ancient predators were moving between the stars, always listening, always hunting. And on a small blue world, a young species continued to broadcast their dreams and songs and stories, completely unaware that they were supposed to already be dead. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen when the hunters finally came calling. Dr. Hannah Kim had never imagined that her first meeting with alien life would happen in a room filled with desperate, frightened beings begging for help. She stood in the center of what the aliens called the Galactic Emergency Council, surrounded by creatures that looked like they had stepped out of humanity's wildest science fiction dreams. But there was nothing exciting about this moment. These aliens were terrified, and somehow they thought Earth could save them. The room was massive, built to hold representatives from dozens of different species. Hannah felt impossibly small next to the towering figures around her. To her left stood a being that looked like a walking tree with crystals growing from its bark. To her right, something that resembled a giant mantis clicked its claws nervously. Above her, floating in specialized atmosphere pods, were creatures that looked like jellyfish made of pure light. Dr. Kim, the lead representative, began, his voice coming through a translation device that made every word sound hollow and strange. He was the Archon Prime, the closest thing this galactic civilization had to a leader. His species looked almost human, except for their pale blue skin and the fact that they were twice as tall as any person Hannah had ever met. Your people have been sending signals into space for 127 of your years. The Archon Prime continued, his voice shaking slightly. Horror! According to everything we know about the galaxy, you should have been destroyed decades ago. The Silence Breakers should have found you. They should have consumed your world and everyone on it. But here you are, alive and still broadcasting. Now civilizations that stayed quiet for thousands of years have been wiped out completely. Hannah tried to process what she was hearing. 3 days ago, she had been a simple scientist studying the possibility of life on other worlds. Then the aliens had arrived, not with celebration or ceremony, but with panic. They had appeared in Earth's solar system in ships that looked more like they were fleeing something than exploring. Their first message had been simple: we need your help. The galaxy is dying. A representative from the Zephyrian Collective stepped forward. Its body was made of what looked like living crystal, changing colors as it spoke. We have been monitoring your transmissions for many years, it said, its voice sounding like wind chimes in a storm. Your radio shows, your television programs, your internet communications. We have watched your species with fascination and confusion. Why confusion? Hannah asked, finding her voice for the first time since entering the chamber. Because you are impossible, replied a delegate from the Kethver Dominion. This alien looked like a cross between a lizard and a spider, with multiple arms that gestured as it spoke. We have studied your entertainment programs, your news broadcasts, your military communications. When your species faces danger, you do not become quiet. You become louder. When you are threatened, you do not hide. You fight back. When your world is in crisis, you do not separate into isolated groups. You work together, the crystal being pulsed with different colors as it continued. Most strange of all are your fictional stories. You create entertainment about alien invasions, natural disasters, and threats that could destroy your entire species. But in these stories, you never choose to hide or stay silent. You always choose to fight. You always choose to make noise. You always choose to stand together. This is completely unknown to us. Double quotes. Hannah began to understand what they were saying. These ancient civilizations had survived by making themselves invisible. When danger came, they turned off their lights, stopped their communications, and hoped the threat would pass them by. It had worked for thousands of years, but now something had changed. The silence breakers are getting smarter, the Archon Prime explained, his voice filled with despair. They are no longer just following signals, they are hunting by other methods. They are finding the quiet worlds too. Strategy that kept us alive for 3,000 years is no longer working. Entire sectors of space have gone dark.
Oh.
Billions of beings have died. But Earth continues to broadcast, the spider-like Kethver delegate said. Your signals grow stronger every year. You launch new satellites, build more powerful transmitters, send out more probes. It should be suicide, but somehow you survive. The silence breakers have passed through your region of space multiple times, but they have never attacked your world. A new voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. It belonged to one of the archivists, ancient beings who kept the records of galactic history. We have been studying your species' behavior patterns, it said, its voice so old it sounded like rocks grinding together. When humans face extinctional-level events in your fictional stories, you have a consistent response. You do not scatter and hide individually. You gather together. You share information freely. You coordinate your efforts. You make yourselves heard. The archivist moved closer, and Hannah could see it was incredibly old, its skin looking like ancient leather. Most importantly, when your fictional humans face a threat that hunts by sound or signal, they do not become quiet. They become strategically loud. They use sound as a weapon. They turn their noise into a tool of survival. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine as the pieces began to fall into place. You think humanity might know something about fighting these silence breakers that you don't? We think the Archon Prime said quietly that your species might be the key to saving us all. The darkness of space around Earth suddenly filled with nightmares. Hundreds of massive ships appeared from nowhere, their twisted metal and living flesh combined into forms that hurt to look at. These were the silence breakers, the devourers that had haunted the galaxy for 3,000 years. They moved through space like a swarm of hungry insects, blocking out the light from distant stars as they approached Earth's solar system. Captain Minho Park stood on the bridge of the Earth's defense ship Harmony, watching the enemy fleet through the main view screen. His hands were steady as he gripped the command rail, but inside his chest, his heart was beating like a war drum. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency, preparing for a battle that everyone knew they could not win. Human fleet was pitifully small compared to what was coming for them. Earth had managed to put together about 300 ships, but most of them were not even real warships. Some were military vessels, yes, but others were cargo ships with weapons bolted onto their hulls. Few were old space stations that had been fitted with engines and sent out to fight. It looked like a collection of toys facing down a pack of wolves. Admiral Lee Jun's voice came through the communication system from the flagship New Seoul. All ships, this is Admiral Lee. You can see what we're facing out there. The aliens we've been talking to for the past few months were right. These things have been killing entire civilizations for thousands of years. They follow signals back to their source and destroy everything they find. Minho looked around at his crew. His communications officer, Su Yang, was barely 22 years old. His weapons officer, Tae Young, had been a civilian engineer just 6 months ago. None of them had ever seen real combat, but they had all volunteered to be here when Earth called for defenders. The funny thing is, Admiral Lee continued, his voice calm despite the approaching death, these silence breakers are expecting us to do what every other species has done for 3,000 years. They expect us to go quiet. They expect us to try to hide. They expect us to scatter and run. The Devourer ships were getting closer now. Minho could see details on their hulls, organic curves mixed with mechanical parts like someone had crossed. A spaceship with a giant sea creature? They moved in perfect formation. Hundreds of predators that had done this same dance countless times before. But we're humans, Admiral Lee said, and Minho could hear the smile in his voice. And humans have never been very good at staying quiet. That was when it started.
What?
Someone on the flagship began to sing. It was an old Korean folk song. Something about mountains and streams and never giving up hope. The voice was strong and clear. It's broadcasting on the main communication channel so every ship could hear it. Within seconds, other voices joined in. The crew of the destroyer Busan started singing a different song, something about sailors and storms. The converted cargo ship Gangnam began broadcasting a children's lullaby. that somehow sounded like a battle cry when sung by 100 adult voices. All ships, Admiral Lee commanded. Open all communication channels. Every frequency, every signal type we have. Let them hear us. The space around Earth erupted with sound. Not just the organized songs from the warships, but every type of noise humans had ever made. Radio stations from Earth joined in, broadcasting music and news and talk shows directly into space. Television signals carried cartoons and movies and sporting events toward the enemy fleet. Even cell phone towers began transmitting, adding their signals to the growing wall of sound. Minho watched his communications officer's face light up with amazement. Captain Suyang said, "I'm reading signals from everywhere. Every satellite, every radio tower, every broadcast station on Earth is transmitting at maximum power. It's like the entire planet is shouting at them." The effect on the silence breakers was immediate and shocking. The perfect formation of their fleet began to waver. Ships that had moved with mechanical precision for thousands of years started to drift off course. Some of them actually stopped, moving entirely as if their pilots were confused or distracted. "Look at that," Taeyong whispered from his weapon station. "They don't know what to do with us." It was true. The Devourer ships had been built to hunt species that tried to hide from them. Their senses were designed to track fear, to follow. The electronic signatures of civilizations trying to stay quiet and avoid detection, but humans were doing the exact opposite. Instead of turning off their signals, they were amplifying them. Instead of scattering in panic, they were gathering together and making more noise. Admiral Lee's voice cut through the chaos of songs and signals. "Today, we don't just fight for Earth," he announced, his words reaching every human ship and every listening station on the planet below. "We fight for the right to be heard. We fight for the right to exist without fear. We fight so that our children can shout at the stars and know that someone will shout back." The silence breakers tried to reorganize their attack, but it was too late. For the first time in 3 millennia, they had encountered prey that refused to act like prey. The hunters had become the hunted, and they didn't know how to handle it. What happened next would be talked about in galactic history for thousands of years to come. The human fleet did something that no military strategist in the galaxy had ever considered possible. Instead of shooting weapons at the enemy, they shot sound. Captain Minho Park watched in amazement as his ship's communication array transformed into something that looked more like a concert speaker than a military weapon. All around the solar system, similar arrays were emerging from hiding places where they had been secretly installed over the past 6 months. Earth's moon revealed dozens of massive transmission dishes that had been disguised as mining equipment. Jupiter's moons sprouted communication towers that reached toward the enemy fleet like metal flowers, now turning toward the sun. "Captain," his communications officer, Su Yang, called out, her voice filled with excitement and terror. "We're not just one ship anymore. We're part of something bigger." She was right. Every human ship had become a single piece in a vast puzzle that stretched across the entire solar system. The cargo ship that had been converted into a weapons platform was now acting as a signal booster. The old space station that barely had working engines was serving as a relay point for transmissions from Earth. Even the tiny scout ships were playing their part, creating a web of interconnected signals that surrounded the silence breaker fleet. Like a net made of sound, Dr. Minji Park's voice came through from the scientific observation ship that was hanging back from the main battle. "All ships, this is Dr. Park. What we're seeing is incredible. The silence breakers are trying to adapt to our strategy, but they can't process what we're doing. Their brains evolved to hunt quiet prey, not loud prey. The Devourer ships were indeed struggling. These creatures had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of finding and destroying civilizations that tried to hide from them. Their senses were incredibly sharp when it came to detecting the faint signals of scared aliens trying to stay hidden. But human signals were not faint. Humans were definitely not trying to hide. Instead of the whispered communications they were used to hunting, the silence breakers found themselves surrounded by the entire history of human noise. Radio shows. From the 1940s, mixed with modern pop music, military communications from old wars played alongside children's television programs. News broadcasts about scientific discoveries competed with comedy shows and sports commentaries. "They're getting confused," reported Tae-young from his weapons station, watching the enemy fleet through his targeting system. "Look at how they're moving. Some of them are trying to follow our signals, but there are too many signals coming from too many directions. They don't know which way to go." Admiral Lee's voice cut through the chaos with a new command that sounded completely insane. "All ships, prepare for Formation Gamma. We're going to dance with them." Formation Gamma was something the human fleet had practiced in secret, but nobody had ever expected to use it in real combat. It was based on an old Korean folk dance, where groups of performers would move in complex patterns while music played. The idea was that the ships would coordinate their movements not through traditional military commands, but through rhythm and melody. The flagship New Seoul began playing a strong, steady drum beat on all frequencies. Other ships joined in with different instruments, violins, flutes, even electric guitars. Within minutes, the human fleet was moving through space in time with the music. Weaving between the confused devourer ships like dancers on a stage, Captain Minho felt his heart racing as his ship spun and dove through the enemy formation, following the beat of the music that filled the communication channels. Around him, his crew worked their stations with practiced efficiency, but they were also smiling. Fighting to music was something humans had never tried before, but somehow it felt natural, like something they had always known how to do. The silence breakers tried to respond, but their hunting instincts were completely overwhelmed. These were predators that had evolved to track single targets, to follow one signal at a time back to its source. But the humans were giving them thousands of signals simultaneously, from hundreds of different directions, all while moving in patterns that seemed to follow no military logic at all. Dr. Park's voice came through again, filled with scientific excitement. "The enemy ships are starting to shut down their sensory systems. They're experiencing what we might call sensory overload. Their brains simply cannot process this much input at once." One by one, the massive devourer ships began to drift aimlessly through space. Their biomechanical systems, which had functioned perfectly for millennia, were shutting down to protect themselves from the overwhelming flood of human noise. Some of the ships actually seemed to be trying to retreat, backing away from the singing, dancing human fleet as if they were encountering something they had never seen before. "This is impossible," whispered Su Yang, watching her sensor displays as more enemy ships went dark. "We're winning. We're actually winning." But it was not impossible. It was simply human. For the first time in galactic history, a species had faced the silence breakers and refused to be silent. Instead of hiding from the predators, they had overwhelmed them with noise, with music. With the sheer chaotic joy of being alive, refusing to be afraid, the hunters had finally met their match in prey that refused to act like prey. 6 months had passed since the day humans taught the galaxy how to make noise again. The Battle of Seoul, as historians were already calling it, had changed everything. The great silence that had protected civilizations for 3,000 years was broken, and in its place came something the galaxy had never experienced before: the sound of hope. Dr. Hannah Kim stood at the observation window of Harmony Station, the massive space facility that had been built in Earth's orbit to handle the flood of alien visitors. She watched as ships from dozens of different worlds docked at the station's ports, each one broadcasting openly as they approached. The sight still amazed her every day. A crystalline ship from the Zephyrian Collective was transmitting what sounded like wind chimes mixed with whale songs. Kethfer military vessel was broadcasting mathematical equations that somehow sounded like poetry when translated. Even the ancient archivists, who had kept silent for 1,000,000 years, were now sharing their vast libraries of knowledge with anyone who wanted to listen. "Hard to believe how much has changed," said Admiral Lee Jun, joining Hannah at the observation deck. The man who had led humanity's impossible victory looked older now, but there was a peace in his eyes that had not been there during the dark days of the battle. Hannah nodded. Watching a small ship from a species she did not recognize yet dock at Port 7. The Galactic Council meeting yesterday approved 15 new species for first contact protocols. 15. Civilizations that have been hiding in the dark for centuries are finally ready to step into the light.
Ow.
It was true. Word of humanity's victory over the Silence Breakers had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. Species that had been too afraid to make any sound for generations were suddenly broadcasting everything: their history, their culture, their art, their science. The galaxy was discovering that it was much more diverse and interesting than anyone had imagined during the long years of silence. The Zephyrians sent us their entire musical library yesterday, Hannah continued, pointing to the crystal ship. 40,000 years of compositions that no one outside their species had ever heard. And the Kethfer are sharing their mathematical discoveries openly for the first time in 3 millennia. Admiral Lee smiled as he watched the busy traffic around the station. My daughter called me yesterday from Earth. She said her school is now teaching 12 different alien languages. 12. Kids who 6 months ago had never imagined aliens existed are now learning to speak to beings from across the galaxy. The communication systems on Harmony Station had been upgraded constantly to handle the flood of news signals. Earth's engineers worked alongside alien technicians to create translation systems that could handle everything from electromagnetic waves to gravitational pulses, 2 forms of communication that humans were still trying to understand. The station had become a Tower of Babel in reverse. Instead of dividing languages, it was bringing them together. Any word from our scout ships? Hannah asked, though she already knew the answer would be concerning. Admiral Lee's expression grew more serious. The Silence Breakers have regrouped near the galactic rim. Our long-range sensors show they're building something. The alien observers think it might be some kind of super ship, bigger than anything they've ever constructed before. Hannah had been expecting this news, but it still sent a chill down her spine. The Silence Breakers had been the galaxy's apex predators for 3,000 years. They would not give up their hunting grounds easily, especially not to a species of noisy primates who had only just learned how to leave their home planet. Let them come, she said, surprising herself with how confident she sounded. They evolved to hunt species that tried to hide from them. They were built to track down civilizations that went quiet when they were afraid. But look around us. She gestured to the dozens of ships broadcasting freely as they moved through space around the station. We're not hiding anymore. None of us are. Through the station's hull, they could hear it, the new sound of the galaxy. It was not the organized music that had defeated the Silence Breakers at Earth, but something even more powerful. It was the sound of millions of voices finally free to speak. Radio waves carried poetry across star systems. Gravitational broadcasts shared scientific discoveries between species that had never met. Even the simple act of ships calling out their positions to traffic control had become a celebration of the right to exist without fear. A young technician approached them with a datapad. Ambassador Kim, we're receiving a signal from the outer rim territories. It's a new species. They call themselves the Harmonizers, and they say they've been listening to our broadcasts. They want to join the Alliance. Hannah took the datapad and smiled. How many does that make this week? 23 new species have made contact since Monday, the technician replied, grinning. And it's only Wednesday. Admiral Lee chuckled. At this rate, we're going to need a bigger station. As if responding to his words, the communication system announced the arrival of another ship. This one from a species called the Songweavers, who had been silent for 2,000 years until they heard about humanity's victory. They were broadcasting what their translators called joy songs as they approached the station. Adding their voices to the growing chorus that filled space around Earth, the trap of silence was broken forever, and the galaxy was finally learning how to sing.